Yesterday, we told you about the SCO summit. Prime Minister Modi hosted it. Leaders from China, Pakistan and Russia were in attendance. At the end of it, they released a joint statement. It's called the New Delhi Declaration. But looks like New Delhi is not too happy about it, or at least parts of it. There was one obvious elephant in the room, the differences between India and China. Now, there are differences with Pakistan as well, but let's stick to the members that matter. The joint statement reaffirmed support for China's Belt and Road Initiative. But one country stayed away, and that country was India. Take a look at the statement. This is what it says. Reaffirming their support for China's BRI initiative, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan note the ongoing work to jointly implement this project. All members except India supported it. And there's nothing new about this position. India has never supported China's Belt and Road Initiative. One, because it undercuts India's position in the region, and two, because it violates India's sovereignty. You see, the BRI has multiple projects in Pakistan. It's called the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Some of those projects are in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, so naturally, India does not support it. Prime Minister Modi made that position clear in his opening remarks. He said connectivity cannot violate territorial integrity. Listen to this.
किसी भी क्षेत्र की प्रगति के लिए मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी का होना बहुत ही आवश्यक है। बेहतर कनेक्टिविटी आपसी व्यापार ही नहीं, आपसी विश्वास भी बढ़ाती है। किंतु इन प्रयासों में एससीओ चार्टर के मूल सिद्धांतों, विशेष रूप से सदस्य देशों की संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान करना बहुत ही आवश्यक है।
Now, Belt and Road is not just any other project. It is Xi Jinping's favorite project, his grand plan to dominate the world. In 2017, he organized the first Belt and Road Forum. It was planned meticulously. Around 30 heads of state and government flew in. So did top bosses of the World Bank, the IMF and the World Trade Organization. It was Xi Jinping's moment to shine. But guess who boycotted that meeting? India. New Delhi's absence was a big setback to Xi Jinping, and the very next month, Doklam happened. China began deploying soldiers and equipment at the tri-junction between India, China and Bhutan. The standoff lasted more than 2 months. Many say it was payback for India's Belt and Road snub. The standoff ended ahead of the BRICS summit in China. There was speculation that Prime Minister Modi could skip. So Beijing agreed to defuse the situation. But in 2020, there was another escalation, the one in the Galwan Valley. The standoff is yet to be diffused, the one in Galwan. But there was a repeat of 2017 last year. In September, China agreed to disengage from certain points in Ladakh. Not all of them, but some of them. Days later, the SCO summit took place in Uzbekistan. Prime Minister Modi came face to face with President Xi Jinping. And my point is this. China is very invested in the Belt and Road, and it's willing to use every trick in the book to get India on board. Force, diplomacy, trickery, especially in the current situation. The BRI has lost steam since the Wuhan virus pandemic. The investments have stalled. The projects have been delayed. So some countries are even looking to leave the forum. Countries like Italy. Their new government is all set to quit the BRI. So China needs to inject momentum into Xi's pet project. But if they're betting on India, it's a useless bet. We told you how New Delhi refused to support BRI in the joint statement, but that was not the only difference of opinion. The SCO also came up with a development strategy for 2030. Once again, India did not sign on. Why? Because it was riddled with Chinese agenda. I'll give you examples. It talked about the Global Development Initiative. It was proposed by Xi Jinping in 2021. India decided not to support that document. Look at what the New Delhi Declaration says about it. The SCO considers it important to ensure the implementation of the Economic Development Strategy 2030 adopted by interested member states. Not all member states, interested member states. All of this signals the friction within the SCO. At the same time, it shows why India must hang on to it. If the joint statement looks like this, when India is the president, imagine what it will look like without India on board. Probably like the Xi Jinping thought. So India's presence in the SCO is not about aiming high, it's about limiting China's march into Central Asia. Yesterday's summit and joint statement reflect that attitude. So India is standing up to China, not just in the SCO, but also in Africa. Africa is the second largest continent in the world. It is resource rich and it has long been ignored. In the colonial times, the West divided it. They invaded and colonized 90% of the continent. Historians call it the scramble for Africa. But in the last few decades, China has taken over. It has turned Africa into its playground, invested billions of dollars, built roads, bridges, power plants, basically entered every business in practically every country. And what did China get in return? Abundant resources and an untapped market. The West is waking up to this, and India is making some moves. Tonight, we want to focus on what India's game plan in Africa is. There's a clear effort to court African powers. India is working on three fronts: investments, trade, and diplomacy. And we'll look at all of them, starting with investments. New Delhi is now the second largest creditor to Africa. The first is China. In other words, after China, India is lending the most amount of money to Africa. I have some numbers. In the last 10 years, India has given $32 billion in credit to Africa. And what is this money for? Metro rails, water supply lines, power plants, and other infrastructure projects. 42 African nations have received this. In fact, out of all the loans that India extended in the last decade, Africa makes up 38%. It shows you how seriously India is pursuing this. New Delhi has opened 195 lines of credit. These are linked to specific projects. And this is 3 times more than India's credit lines in Asia. Let me also tell you which countries are the top recipients: South Africa, Mauritius, Mozambique, Sudan, and Egypt. Indian companies are investing in these countries too, also in Ghana and Nigeria, which brings us to trade. India's main exports to Africa are petrol and pharma products. Imports include crude oil, gold, coal, and other minerals. Bilateral trade with Africa grew by more than 9% last year. It touched almost $100 billion. The plan is to double this in the next 7 years. So $200 billion by 2030. But how will India achieve this? Which brings us to our third point: diplomatic engagement. In 2015, India organized the India-Africa Forum Summit. It was called India's largest ever Africa outreach. In 2018, Prime Minister Modi addressed the Ugandan parliament. He outlined the Kampala principles, 10 principles guiding India's Africa engagement. And since then, there has been a lot of diplomatic push. In the last 9 years, India opened 25 new embassies or consulates. 18 of them were in Africa. In February, New Delhi hosted the Voice of the Global South Summit. Africa was part of that. India is also pushing for the inclusion of the African Union in the G20. If you connect all these dots, you'll see this. Africa is one of India's foreign policy priorities. It helps that both sides share historic ties, and these relations are shaped by colonialism and its repercussions. Both have suffered. Both India and Africa also have a young demographic, quite a lot of potential, and a growing diaspora. Africa is home to about 3 million people of Indian origin. 1 million of them are in South Africa. So people-to-people ties already exist, which makes the partnership organic. But despite these convergences and India's push, it has a long way ahead, mostly because it made a late start. China saw Africa's economic potential long ago, and it got there first. The rest of the world, including India, is only playing catch-up. China is Africa's largest economic partner. Trade in 2021 was worth more than $250 billion. In the last decade, Beijing pledged more than $134 billion to Africa. $134 billion. That's 11 times what India has offered. China has also made early moves to tap mineral resources like lithium and bauxite. So like I said, a lot of catching up to do. Thankfully, the world is also realizing the pitfalls of Chinese loans. They almost took over the airport in Uganda. Projects with China end up compromising national assets. India can be a credible and reliable alternative. It should build on cultural and historical ties and stay the course on diplomacy. For starters, revive that India-Africa summit. The third edition, like we said, was held in 2015. Now is a good time to work on the next one. And while China may be an extreme case, the rest of the world is hardly doing better. On Monday, we broke a record. The world recorded its hottest day ever. Average temperature hit 17 degrees Celsius for the first time. And then we broke that record again on Tuesday. That's when the world's average temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius. So we've seen 2 of the hottest days on record in a row. And this is the average of temperatures from the poles to the equator. It's not just the land, the seas too are heating up. This can have devastating effects. The most obvious is an increase in tropical storms, your cyclones, hurricanes, or typhoons. Warm seas will result in more of these. But there are other impacts as well, like wildfires, droughts, and heavy rains, and all of these extreme weather events are on the rise. Here's a report.
Wildfires in Canada. Heat waves in the southern US and northern Mexico. Extreme heat in Southeast Asia. Record heat and torrential rains in China. Everywhere you look, the world is in a state of upheaval, and it's breaking records. The planet just saw its 2 hottest days on record, back to back. On Monday, the global average temperature was 17 degrees Celsius. It was the highest in recorded history. The last high was 16.9 degrees in 2016. And then on Tuesday, it went further up. The global average temperature was 17.1 degrees Celsius. Now you may think 17 degrees is no big deal. And the rise of 0.1 degrees isn't much. But remember, this is the global average. It isn't evenly distributed. So some places become hotspots, like Texas and Arizona in the US, the northern regions of Mexico, Shanghai and Beijing in China, Spain. And it's these hotspots that are driving up the global average temperature. The worst part is, this is probably just the beginning. Experts say there will be more record-breaking days ahead. Which brings us to the question, why? One reason is, of course, human-induced climate change. Our constant greenhouse gas emissions. They help trap heat within the atmosphere, so temperatures go up. The other cause for the extreme weather is the El Nino weather phenomenon. It occurs naturally over the Pacific Ocean. It causes ocean surface temperatures to rise. It takes place every few years, and this year it's back.
The tropical Pacific Ocean is currently experiencing El Nino condition. And this is a result of rapid and substantive change, both in the atmosphere and in the ocean. What we know is that throughout the next 5 years, we are likely to have one of the warmest years on record.
He says one of the next 5 years will be the warmest on record. And 2023 is already breaking heat records, even before the El Nino is in full swing. This is thanks to our greenhouse gas emissions. Look at some recent examples. Cyclone Biparjoy in the Arabian Sea. It was a rare occurrence, as powerful cyclones usually form on the other side of the Indian subcontinent. Then look at the wildfires in Canada. They do have an annual wildfire season, yet this year they've seen some of the worst. Same with Russia's Siberia. It's a region known for its inhospitable cold. Now, each of these events can be explained as an anomaly, but look at them together and you'll see a pattern. Climate change may not start causing Katrina-like hurricanes every day, but the chance of it happening again in our lifetimes increases. And less powerful disasters will become more frequent. They'll start becoming a part of our lives, making our lives more miserable. The only way to stop this is for governments to recognize the danger and act now.
Our next story is about smartphones. They've become near universal among children and teenagers. 76% of children between ages 10 and 14 use mobile phones the world over. And this is despite the side effects, the known side effects. There's abundant research on that, on what phones do to teens, how they hurt mental health, how addictive they are, and how they impede attention. Yet children are glued to their digital bricks, and parents are confused about what to do. So now schools and governments are deciding for them. The latest headline is from the Netherlands. The country is banning mobile phones, tablets, and smartwatches from classrooms. Our next report tells you more.
Mobile phones have become intertwined with our lives. They are almost like our extended limb, because these digital bricks are attached to us at all times. We take them to work, to our bedrooms, our kitchens. and even our schools. Because mobile usage isn't limited to adults. Smartphones have also become the norm among children and teenagers. Between ages 10 and 14, 76% of children use mobile phones worldwide. And this is the world average. But in many countries, the numbers are far greater. In the UK, 91% of children aged 11 have mobiles of their own. So do 80% of children aged 9 to 16 in Europe, and 76% aged 10 to 14 in India. They use mobile phones during classes and free periods alike, even during lunchtime and bus rides. The question is, do mobile phones belong in schools? According to the Netherlands, no. So they're banning mobile phones, tablets, and smartwatches from classrooms. The ban will come into force on 1st January, and the Dutch aren't the only ones with such a ban. In 2018, France banned mobile phones in schools. So did China in 2021. Italy enforced a similar ban last year. And most recently, Finland said it too wants to join the club. Even if some countries are dragging their heels to ban mobiles, schools are taking matters into their own hands. Like in the US, schools in more than 7 states have banned devices in class. Others are joining the wave. Because the use of mobiles in schools is a growing issue worldwide. And the risks of excessive device usage are well documented. Phones can be addictive and distracting. Studies say higher use of social media increases the risk of depression. And that social media use predicts lower life satisfaction in teens. So why are children given a smartphone in the first place? It's a modern dilemma, and parents are still divided over it. Some think neither the school nor the government should dictate phone usage. The decision should be personal, and that children often use their devices to simply listen to music, arrange rides home, and check on grades or assignments. But many parents disagree. They believe children end up using their phones for so much more. The fear of missing out has them constantly scrolling on social media. They even fall prey to cyberbullying or lose all awareness of what's going on around them. And when grades tank, phones are the first thing to blame. Sure, phones can be useful, especially during emergencies and for research on assignments. But we all know that phone usage is rarely limited to that. So maybe to err on the side of caution, banning phones in schools isn't a bad idea.
Money has long been an inspiration for many artists. Pink Floyd called it the root of all evil. Wu-Tang Clan rapped, "Cash rules everything around me." But superstars aren't just happy with singing about money or making money by singing, they strive for more. Sometimes they move economies with their vocal cords. And the biggest example of this is Taylor Swift, the iconic American singer. She's one of the highest paid entertainers in the world, and she is on a world tour right now, the Eras Tour. It is set to earn a record $1 billion in ticket sales. And if you think this is a big number, well, think again, because this is just the ticket revenue. Concerts make money in many ways. People spend on merchandise, accommodation, travel, and Swifties, or the fans of Taylor Swift, spend about $1,300 on average. So if you add everything, her tour could generate $5 billion. That's right, $5 billion. That's more than the GDP of many countries. And this may be the best case scenario, artists helping with economic growth. In some cases, they also push up inflation. Last month, we saw this in Sweden. The American star singer Beyoncé kicked off her world tour in Sweden in the month of May. It caused a huge influx of visitors. Hotel and restaurant prices suddenly rose, and the result was this. Sweden's inflation surged. They called it Bayflation. It sounds bizarre, but Bayflation and the swift lift are only part of the norm, which brings us to something called the concert economy. It means exactly what it sounds like. It tells us how concerts affect economic growth and inflation, and it is seen across the world because artists are so much more than just singers and songwriters. They are an economic phenomenon, an obsession, an industry unto themselves sometimes. So their hugely lucrative tours benefit economies. And don't be mistaken, this is not a new concept, a new trend. In 1964, the Beatles practically rescued the British economy. The UK had a negative balance between imports and exports. Then the Beatles went on tour. They earned income in dollars, the Deutsche Mark, and the yen. Thanks to international ticket sales, royalties, and even appearance fees, and the British economy got a boost. You see, the concert economy is all about exporting music. Exhibit A, K-pop. It has become a global phenomenon, and now it contributes $10 billion to the South Korean economy. Boy band BTS alone accounts for about $4 billion. And exporting music is especially great for smaller economies. Sweden literally awarded ABBA for their contribution to the country's exports. And many say U2 was one of Ireland's top 3 exports in the 90s. And as we speak, it's the summer of concerts. Beyoncé and Bruce Springsteen are reigning over Europe. Taylor Swift has taken over the US and Australia. In some parts of the world, it seems like everyone is going to a concert. But if you're elsewhere, like in some African or Asian nations, you're probably suffering from serious FOMO. So why don't global music stars tour certain countries as much? There are multiple reasons, like the lack of great venues. Experts say every major European and American city has a minimum 50 venues for performances. This is where artists can just plug in and play. In countries like India, that is not the case. So when artists come here, they have to bring their own high-tech gear. And then there are other reasons, like high promoter costs, red tapeism from government authorities, and the lack of a large fan base. But to many fans, these factors don't really matter, because those who can will travel far and wide to attend these concerts.
They were really expensive. They were like 5,000 reais. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And the plane tickets after that, because, well, I had the ticket, so I had to get there. The plane tickets cost about 6,000.
I actually didn't get the ticket. My friends did, because there were like 30,000 people in the queue for Edinburgh. So it was kind of a team effort. So we got the tickets. They were incredibly expensive, but I was willing to pay for it. I was willing to travel 6 hours plus on a train to get there.
Fact of the matter, money is funny in this rich man's world. But even in this material world, music hails supreme, it seems. And crowd-pulling concerts often pull up entire economies too. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Yesterday we showed you a Japanese sea turning red. Today we bring you visuals of a Japanese river turning lime green. No one knows what happened and why this happened. But an investigation is underway. On a Florida beach, swimmers got a surprise guest, a shark. It was captured on camera swimming alongside beachgoers. In India's Nagaland, giant boulders crushed cars after a landslide, killing 2 people. The horrific footage was captured on a car's dash cam. And finally, what makes the 5th of July significant? We're taking you back in history to the year 1977, to Pakistan's Black Day, when General Zia-ul-Haq raised a coup. He seized power from President Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, leading to 11 years of martial law in the country. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.